She wasn't supposed to speak. She wasn't supposed to be anything in that room except invisible. A maid, a ghost, a woman who poured water and disappeared. But when the translator smiled and said the words that would destroy everything Adrian had spent 6 years building, she felt something crack open inside her chest. Not the deal. Him. And before her mind could stop her mouth, she stepped forward. He's lying to you. The entire boardroom went silent. 12 Korean executives, 4 lawyers, 1 billionaire who hadn't looked at her, really looked at her, in 3 years. And now he was looking. Zara, Adrian said, his voice low and dangerous. What did you just say? She didn't flinch. She couldn't afford to. Not now. And not when she could see exactly what the translator was doing. The same thing people had been doing to her whole life, using silence as a weapon. I said, she repeated, her voice steady even as her heart shattered. He is lying to you. Every word he just translated. It was wrong. Deliberately wrong. The translator laughed, a short, nervous sound. She's a maid. She's the only honest person in this room, said one of the Korean executives in perfect English, his eyes fixed on Zara with something that looked like respect. And that was the moment Adrian Cole, billionaire, CEO, the man who had once held her like she was the only real thing in his world, truly saw her for the first time in 3 years. Too bad it might already be too late. If you've ever had to choose between staying silent to stay safe or speaking up and losing everything, this story was made for you. Stay with it. Before we continue, hit subscribe, like, and comment down below where you're watching. The Cole Industries building lived above the city like a judgment. 47 floors of steel and glass, cold and deliberate. The kind of architecture that didn't invite you in so much as remind you that you hadn't been. From the street on gray London mornings, when the Thames smelled like rain and rust, people looked up at it the way they looked at things they'd never touch, with a mixture of awe and quiet acceptance. Zara Mensah did not look up. She had learned somewhere between the first year and the third that looking up at things you couldn't have only made the weight heavier. So she kept her eyes forward, her black uniform pressed and precise, her bag hitched over one shoulder, her expression the careful blank of someone who had practiced invisibility until it became a second skin. She was 31 years old. She had a first-class degree in international relations from the university. She spoke 4 languages, English, Twi, French, and Korean, the last of which she had learned during 2 years in Seoul that had given her everything and then taken most of it back. And every morning, she walked through the service entrance of Cole Industries, took the staff elevator to the executive floor, and cleaned rooms that belonged to a man she had once loved, with the kind of love that ruins you quietly. She didn't think about that. She had also learned somewhere between the first year and the third how not to think about certain things. The executive floor smelled like leather and expensive restraint. Zara moved through it the way water moves around stone, efficiently, without friction, without leaving a mark. She straightened boardroom chairs. She replaced water carafes. She collected the coffee cups that the junior lawyers left behind like evidence of their stress. Nobody looked at her. This was not cruelty exactly. It was simply the architecture of the world she worked in, the invisible infrastructure that kept the visible world running. Maids, cleaners, service staff. The people who made sure everything was perfect so that other people could focus on being important. She was refilling the last carafe in the main boardroom when she heard his voice in the corridor. She always heard him before she saw him. This was not sentiment, it was survival. 3 years of working in his building had trained her body to register his presence the way it registered weather. A shift in pressure, a change in temperature. The Korean delegation lands at 2, his PA was saying, breathless and efficient beside him. Mr. Yoon's team has requested a private pre-meeting at 4. The translator, Mr. Park, will arrive at 3:30. I don't want pre-meetings, Adrian said. His voice was exactly as she remembered it. Low, controlled. The kind of voice that had learned to carry authority so naturally it no longer sounded like effort. I want the deal table ready by 5. 1 meeting. We close it or we don't. Yes, sir. And get someone to check the boardroom. He pushed the door open. Zara was already moving toward the service exit, carafe in hand, her back to him, her pulse doing something it had no business doing. "It's been done," she said without turning around. "Fresh water. The temperature in the room is set to 21 degrees as per the Korean delegation's preferences. The document folders are aligned." A pause. "Thank you," Adrian said. She left before he could see her face. She always left before he could see her face. 47 floors above London, Adrian Cole stood at his office window and tried to remember the last time something had felt real. The city spread out below him in shades of gray and gold. Beautiful in the abstract. The way things you can't touch are always beautiful. He had built this. Not inherited it, not stumbled into it. Built it from the wreckage of his father's collapsed company when he was 26. Through 6 years of decisions that had cost him sleep and relationships, and something he couldn't quite name, but felt the absence of in quiet moments like this one. The Korea deal was everything. A partnership with Yoon Industries would open East Asian markets that had been closed to coal industries for a decade. Adrian had spent 18 months cultivating the relationship, learning Korean business customs, building trust through patience and respect, learning which silences meant yes and which meant not yet. He had not learned Korean. He had trusted Mr. Park for that. Park came with impeccable credentials. Former diplomatic interpreter, 15 years in Seoul, references from 3 Fortune 500 companies. Adrian was not a man who second-guessed his decisions, but something about today felt like standing on ground that hadn't fully settled. He turned from the window. On his desk, in a slim silver frame that he had never moved and never explained to anyone, was a photograph of a shoreline he hadn't visited in 3 years. No people in the frame, just water and sky, and the particular quality of light that exists only in certain moments, when something is ending or beginning, and you can't yet tell which. He turned the frame face down. He had a deal to close. By 4 o'clock, the executive floor had transformed. The Korean delegation moved through it with the quiet authority of people accustomed to rooms changing around them. Mr. Yoon himself was smaller than Adrian had expected. Compact, precise, with eyes that assessed everything and revealed nothing. He bowed slightly when they met. Adrian bowed back, the correct depth, and watched something shift almost imperceptibly in Yoon's expression. Approval, perhaps, or simply the recognition that this was a man who had done his homework. Mr. Park, the translator, stood slightly to the left, medium height, smooth-faced, with a smile that arrived a half-second too quickly. He translated Adrian's welcome with fluid efficiency. Yoon's response came back warm, measured. Everything appeared correct. In the corner of the boardroom, near the service panel, Zara refilled glasses and tried to make herself part of the furniture. She was not supposed to be here during the meeting. The junior service staff had called in sick, a stomach bug moving through the building, and her supervisor had asked her to cover. Just water service. Just the edges of the room. Just invisible. She poured water into Mr. Yoon's glass and heard Mr. Park translate something Adrian had said about partnership terms. She paused, set the carafe down very carefully. Because what Adrian had said and what Mr. Park had told the Korean delegation, he said, were not the same thing. Not even close. Adrian had offered a 60-40 revenue split in Yoon's favor for the first 3 years. A generous opening position, a gesture of good faith. Mr. Park had told them Adrian was proposing 70-30 in coal industry's favor. Non-negotiable, with penalty clauses for underperformance. Zara stood very still. She watched Mr. Yoon's face, the slight cooling, the almost invisible withdrawal, the way his hands rested differently on the table. She had spent 2 years in Seoul. She knew what Korean professional displeasure looked like when it was being politely concealed. She looked at Mr. Park. He was smiling, easy, relaxed. The smile of a man who believed he was the only one in the room who understood what was being said. He had not looked at her once. Why would he? She was the maid. Zara picked up the carafe. Her hands were perfectly steady. Her heart was doing something enormous and complicated inside her chest. Because she knew what happened next would cost her. Her job at minimum. Her invisibility, certainly. and possibly something much larger, much more dangerous, that she had spent 3 years carefully protecting. But she looked at Adrian Cole, at the man who was nodding along to a translation that was systematically dismantling 6 years of his work, and she felt something she had promised herself she would never feel again. She felt responsible for him. You were always his, even when you were trying not to be, a voice said somewhere inside her. That's the thing about real love. It doesn't ask permission to stay. She set the carafe on the table. She opened her mouth, and she stepped out of the shadows for the first time in 3 years. The word landed in the boardroom like a stone dropped into still water. He's lying to you. For exactly 3 seconds, nobody moved. Then everything moved at once. Mr. Park turned first, and the smile that had lived so comfortably on his face did something interesting. It didn't disappear. It recalibrated, stretched into something thinner, more careful, the smile of a man rapidly calculating distances and exits. I apologize, he said smoothly in English, his voice carrying the practiced calm of someone who had been in difficult rooms before. The service staff sometimes... She's speaking, said Adrian. His voice was quiet. That particular quiet that Zara recognized. The one that wasn't calm at all, but was instead the surface of something very deep and very cold. The quiet he used when he was most dangerous. Everyone stopped. Adrian Cole had not become what he was by being the loudest person in the room. He had become what he was by being the stillest, the one person whose attention, when it turned fully toward you, felt like standing in direct sunlight after a long winter. Impossible to ignore. Impossible to look away from. And he was looking at Zara now, fully, completely, the way he had not looked at her in 3 years. Go ahead, he said. Zara had imagined this moment in the way you imagine things you're terrified of, vaguely at the edges of sleep, never letting it get too detailed because detail makes things real. She had not imagined it feeling like this, like stepping off a ledge and discovering, mid-air, that you had forgotten whether you could fly. She set her shoulders, clasped her hands in front of her, the way her mother had taught her. You stand like you belong wherever you are, Zara, because you do. And she looked at Mr. Yoon, not at Adrian, because looking at Adrian right now would undo her completely. She spoke in Korean, fluent, precise, formal Korean, the register used in high-level business negotiations. Yes, the kind that signals education and intention and respect. She had spent 2 years in Seoul learning exactly this, and the language came back to her now like muscle memory, like breathing, like something that had always lived inside her waiting to be needed. She said, Mr. Yoon, I apologize for the interruption, and I take full responsibility for any breach of protocol. But I believe you have been given incorrect information about the terms Mr. Cole proposed, and I cannot in good conscience remain silent. The shift in the room was seismic. Mr. Yoon, who had been cooling, withdrawing, already composing in his mind the polite language of a deal that would not happen, sat very still. His eyes moved to Zara with an expression that recalibrated everything. Not surprise exactly. Something more precise than surprise. Recognition. And the recognition of someone who has just realized the room is different from what they thought it was. He said in Korean, please continue. Mr. Park moved, not toward Zara, toward Adrian. His voice came fast and smooth and utterly confident. Mr. Cole, I don't know what this woman thinks she heard, but I assure you she's misunderstood. The Korean dialect used by Mr. Yoon's team is highly specialized, and without formal training, she's speaking Korean, Adrian said, still in that quiet. Fluently. She's a maid. I know what she is. Something in those 4 words, the weight in them, the history, made 2 of the junior lawyers exchange a glance. Adrian stood up. He did not raise his voice. He did not gesture dramatically. He simply rose to his full height and turned to face Mr. Park with the complete, undivided attention of a man who had just understood that something in his world was structurally wrong and was now determining the exact nature and extent of the damage. Sit down, he said to Park. Don't speak. Park sat. Zara continued. She told Mr. Yoon, in Korean, Exactly what Adrian had proposed. The 60-40 split, the 3-year good faith period, the absence of penalty clauses in the opening terms. She was precise. She used the correct financial terminology. She did not editorialize or embellish. Then she said, I cannot speak to Mr. Cole's broader intentions, but the words he used, I heard them clearly, and the words you were given were not his words. Silence. Mr. Yoon looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at Mr. Park with an expression that required no translation whatsoever. And then he did something that nobody in the room expected. He smiled. Not a polite smile. A real one. The kind that reaches the eyes, that carries warmth and something like relief. He turned to his team and said something rapid and low. One of his colleagues, and a younger woman with sharp eyes and a jade pin in her lapel, leaned forward and opened a laptop. Then Mr. Yoon looked at Adrian and said, in careful but clear English, that he had apparently been choosing not to use until this moment. Mr. Cole, I think we start again, from the beginning, with honest words. The next 20 minutes were the most surreal of Zara's professional life, which had contained several competitors for that title. She translated, standing in a boardroom where she had been invisible 10 minutes ago, on in her black service uniform with her hair pulled back and her hands that still faintly smelled like lemon cleaning solution. She translated a billion-dollar negotiation between a British billionaire and a Korean conglomerate. She was good at it. She knew she was good at it. Had always known. The way you know things about yourself that the world hasn't caught up to yet. She found the right words. She navigated the spaces between what was said and what was meant. She knew when to translate literally and when to translate truthfully, which are not always the same thing. Mr. Park was quietly, efficiently escorted from the building by 2 members of Adrian's security team. He did not make a scene. Men like that rarely did. Their power depended on not being seen clearly, and the moment they were, there was nothing left to protect. Adrian did not look at Zara while she translated. He looked at Mr. Yoon, at the documents, at the numbers on the screens. He was entirely professional, entirely focused, but she felt him. The way you feel a fire in a room, even when your back is to it. The warmth, the danger, the absolute obliterating awareness of something that refuses to be ignored. By 7 o'clock, the terms were agreed. Not signed. That would take lawyers and weeks, but agreed in the way that matters most. 2 men who respected each other had looked at each other across a table and decided to trust. Mr. Yoon shook Adrian's hand. Then he turned to Zara and bowed. A deeper bow than protocol required, the kind that means something personal. She bowed back, her throat tight with something she couldn't name. You are wasted, he said to her quietly in Korean. In wherever you are. She smiled, didn't answer. Some things don't have answers that fit in words. The Korean delegation filed out with their lawyers and their laptops, and the particular satisfied energy of people who had come expecting war and found peace instead. And then the room was empty, except for Zara and Adrian. She was collecting the water glasses when he spoke. How long? His voice was different now. The boardroom voice was gone, stripped away, the way weather strips things down to their essential structures. What was left was something raw, something she recognized from a different time, a different city, a different version of both of them. She didn't pretend not to understand the question. 3 years, she said, 8 months and some days. The precise duration of her employment at Coal Industries. She heard him absorb this, the small shift in his breathing, the quality of the silence that followed. You've been here, he said, this whole time. Yes. And you never. No. Another silence. She kept her hands moving. Glasses, napkins, the mechanical orderliness of a task that required nothing from her except her hands. Zara. Just her name. Just 2 syllables. But the way he said it, like something he had been holding underwater for a very long time and had finally helplessly let surface, made her stop moving entirely. She stood with her back to him. Her eyes were dry. She was not going to cry. She had made herself that promise 3 years and 8 months ago in a different country, and she intended to keep it. Look at me, he said. Adrian, please. The please undid something. It was such a small word. Such a specific kind of small. The smallness of a large person making themselves vulnerable, which is the most frightening kind of courage there is. She turned around. He looked exactly like he had looked 3 years ago, standing on a shoreline in Ghana, telling her that everything was going to be fine, except older, and something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. A fracture healed wrong, the way bones sometimes do. She knew that fracture. She had one in exactly the same place. You saved the deal, he said. Yes. You could have let it fail. Yes. Why didn't you? She looked at him for a long moment. Outside, London was going dark, the city lights beginning their nightly argument with the sky. In the boardroom, everything was very still. Because it was the right thing to do, she said finally. It was true. It was also not the whole truth. But some truths need more time before they're safe to say out loud. Adrian looked at her like he knew this, like he had always known exactly the distance between what she said and what she meant, and had learned somewhere along the way to be patient with it. We need to talk, he said. Not tonight, she said. She picked up the tray of glasses. Her hands were steady. Tonight you should call your lawyers and celebrate a deal you almost lost. She walked to the service exit. Zara, she paused, didn't turn around. Thank you, he said. She nodded once, a small, precise movement, and pushed through the door. In the service corridor alone, she leaned against the wall and pressed the back of her hand to her mouth and breathed. In and out. The slow, a deliberate breathing of someone managing something enormous. 3 years. She had kept herself invisible for 3 years, and in 30 minutes she had undone all of it. The question now, the question that would keep her awake until the London dawn came gray and cold through her window, was whether undoing it had been the beginning of something, or the end. If you've ever done something brave for someone you love, something that cost you everything you'd been protecting, and then had to walk away before they could see you fall apart, you know exactly what's in Zara's chest right now. Don't go anywhere. What happens next will change everything. She requested a transfer the next morning, not a resignation. She had learned in 3 years and 8 months that disappearing completely raised more questions than quietly relocating. Oh, a transfer. From executive floor service to the building's lower-level hospitality team. Conference room setup, catering logistics. The kind of work that happened 3 floors below Adrian Cole's orbit and required absolutely no reason to be near the 47th floor ever again. Her supervisor, Mrs. Okafor, looked at the request form over the rim of her glasses with the expression of a woman who had seen many things and was currently seeing another one. You've been on the executive floor for 3 years, she said. Yes. You're the best I have up there. Thank you. Zara, Mrs. Okafor set the form down. Is everything all right? Everything is fine, Zara said. I just think a change would be good. Mrs. Okafor looked at her for a long moment. The particular look of a woman who knows she is being given a partial truth and is deciding whether to accept it. She stamped the form. Give me 2 weeks, and she said, I need to find your replacement up there first. 2 weeks. Zara nodded. 2 weeks was manageable. 2 weeks was a perimeter she could defend. She was wrong. He found her at noon, not on the executive floor. She had avoided it completely since last night, rerouting her morning rounds with the precision of someone navigating a minefield they had personally mapped. She was in the 32nd floor kitchen, restocking the hospitality cart, when she heard the door open behind her. She knew without turning around. The pressure shift, the change in temperature. You requested a transfer, Adrian said. She kept stacking mineral water bottles, methodical, unhurried. Word travels fast. Mrs. Okafor has worked for me for 11 years. She thought I should know. That was unnecessary. Was it? He stepped into the kitchen. She could feel him behind her. Not close, but present in the way that made distance feel theoretical. You expose a conspiracy in my boardroom, save a deal worth £300 million, and then request a transfer to conference room catering before I can say good morning. What exactly would you call that? Efficiency, she said. A short silence, then quietly. Zara, don't. I haven't said anything yet. You were going to say something that makes this complicated. She turned around then, because her back to him felt more vulnerable than her face. And it doesn't have to be complicated. I did what was right last night, that's all. You don't owe me anything and I don't want anything. The transfer is just running, he said. The word hit flat and precise, the way true things do. She looked at him. He was in his working clothes. Charcoal suit, no tie. The top button of his shirt open in the way that meant the day had already been long. There were shadows under his eyes. He had not slept either. Good, said something uncharitable inside her. Then immediately, no, not good. Never good. I'm not running, she said. I'm being practical. There's a version of running that looks exactly like that. Adrian, have dinner with me. The kitchen went very quiet. Outside the door, 32 floors of a building continued its busy, indifferent life. In here, the air had changed into something that required careful handling. Oh my, no, she said. Why? Because we both know dinner isn't dinner. He was quiet for a moment. Then, what is it? It's 3 years of questions I don't have the right answers to yet. She turned back to the cart. When I have the right answers, I'll let you know. She pushed the cart toward the door. He stepped aside. He always stepped aside. She had forgotten that about him, the way he made space for her, even when he wanted to fill it. I looked for you, he said as she reached the door, her hand stilled on the cart handle. After Ghana, he said. After everything. I looked for you for 8 months. She closed her eyes, just briefly, the length of a breath. I know, she said, and she left before he could ask how. She knew because she had been findable. Not obviously, not in the ways that made it easy, but findable, if you knew where to look. She had kept the same phone number for 6 months after leaving Ghana before finally changing it. She had maintained the same email address for almost a year. She had, in ways she had never admitted to herself until right now, standing in a service elevator with her heart in her throat, left doors open. She just hadn't expected him to actually walk through them, and then he hadn't. And she had told herself this was fine. This was correct. This was the universe being sensible on behalf of two people who had lost the ability to be sensible about each other. She had come to London 18 months later, following a job placement agency's offer of domestic service work. Honest work, good pay, structured hours. She had not known, when she accepted the placement, that it was coal industries. Or rather, she had known, and had told herself she didn't, which is a different thing entirely and considerably more dangerous. The next 3 days were a study in avoidance as high art. Zara changed her routes, her timings, her break schedules. She took the service stairs instead of the elevator. She ate lunch at 10:45 and 4:30 instead of noon. She was a ghost so committed to haunting a specific absence that she practically left impressions in the air of the places she wasn't. And still he found her. Not aggressively, that was never his way, but consistently. A coffee left at the service station on the 32nd floor, with her name written on it in his handwriting, no note. A text from an unknown number that said only, "The transfer has been paused. I'll explain if you'll listen." A moment in the lobby on Thursday morning when she rounded a corner and walked directly into him, literally her forehead against his chest, his hand coming up automatically to steady her arm. And they stood like that for exactly 2 seconds before she stepped back, and he let her go, and they both pretended the 2 seconds hadn't happened. They had happened. She thought about them for the rest of the day with the helpless, furious attention of someone trying not to think about something. On Friday, something changed the equation entirely. She was in the executive floor archive room, a narrow, climate-controlled space where physical documents were stored in the way large companies store the evidence of their own history. Retrieving files for a senior PA when she overheard the conversation through the thin wall separating the archive from Adrian's private meeting room. 2 voices, Adrian's, and one she didn't recognize. Male, clipped, carrying the particular confidence of someone who believed they held leverage. "Mr. Park has friends, Mr. Cole," the unknown voice was saying. "Influential friends. People who would find it very interesting to know that a member of your domestic staff interfered in a sensitive international negotiation. The Korean deal, as you know, is not yet signed. A formal complaint filed through the right channels. Questions about whether the translation was accurate, whether coal industries acted in good faith, could create considerable difficulty. Silence from Adrian's side of the wall. That sounds like a threat, he said. It's a conversation, the voice said smoothly. The kind that doesn't need to happen if you're willing to have a different conversation. About Mr. Park's wrongful termination. About appropriate compensation. Mr. Park wasn't terminated, Adrian said. He was escorted out of a building he was caught committing fraud in. There's a distinction. One that lawyers can make very blurry, very expensively. Another silence. Longer this time. Zara stood motionless in the archive room, a folder pressed against her chest, barely breathing. Get out of my building, Adrian said. His voice was completely level. It was the most frightening version of him, not because it was cruel, but because it was certain. The voice of a man who had calculated the entire landscape of a conflict before responding to the opening shot. And tell Mr. Park that if I receive one more communication from him or anyone representing him, I will forward the boardroom recordings, which exist and are comprehensive, to every regulatory body with jurisdiction over professional translators in this country. Then I'll give them to the Korean embassy. Then I'll give them to the press. A pause. Have a good afternoon. The sound of a door, footsteps, then silence. Zara stood in the archive room and understood, with the cold clarity of someone seeing a thing whole for the first time, that she had not ended anything by stepping forward in that boardroom. She had started something. And whatever it was, whatever Park and his influential friends were prepared to do, it was aimed, at least partly, at her. She was still standing there recalibrating everything when the archive door opened. Adrian stood in the doorway. He looked at her. She looked at him. The folder was still pressed against her chest like a shield, which felt suddenly absurdly accurate. How much did you hear? He asked. Enough. He nodded slowly, leaned against the doorframe with his arms crossed. Not closed body language. She knew the difference. She knew him. But the posture of someone steadying themselves against something. I need you to understand something, he said. What's coming, whatever Park tries, I can handle it. I've handled worse. I know you can handle it, she said. And I'm not worried about you. Then what are you worried about? She looked at him for a long moment. The archive room was very small. The distance between them was very small. The pretense that she was simply an employee in a building, that he was simply her employer, that the last 3 years had been nothing more than what they appeared to be. All of it was very, very small. I'm worried, she said carefully, about what happens when people start asking why a maid speaks fluent Korean and what answers come up when they look into it. Something shifted in his face. Not surprise, something more careful than surprise. The expression of a man who has just been handed a map to a place he has been trying to find for 3 years. What answers would come up, he asked quietly. The archive room hummed with climate control. Outside, London existed in its enormous, indifferent way. That's a long conversation, Zara said. I have time. I don't. She moved toward the door. He straightened to let her pass, always making space, always. And she stopped beside him, close enough that she could see the specific way he was holding himself still. The effort of it. Adrian, she said without looking at him, if Park comes after me, if any of this touches my name, promise me you'll let me handle it myself. Zara, promise me. A pause. She felt him wrestle with it, the instinct toward protection against the respect for her autonomy. She knew which one he would choose. She had always known, which was part of why this was so complicated. I can't promise that, he said. She nodded. She had expected this answer. She turned and looked at him directly, fully, and without the careful management she usually applied to the act of looking at him. And for a moment they simply existed in the same space without pretending it was neutral. Then we're both in trouble, she said. She walked out. Behind her she heard him exhale. A long, slow breath. The sound of a man setting down something heavy he knows he'll have to pick back up again. He came to find her on a Sunday, not at the building. The building had too many floors, too many corridors, too many places for distance to disguise itself as professionalism. He came to the address on her employee file, which he had not looked at in 3 years and 8 months of deliberate, disciplined restraint, and which he looked at on Saturday night with the specific feeling of a man who has run out of reasons to keep waiting. It was a flat in Peckham, near a third floor, narrow staircase, the kind of building that had been divided and subdivided until each unit contained exactly enough space for one life lived carefully. He stood outside the door for longer than he would admit to anyone, his hands in the pockets of his coat, the Sunday morning quiet of the street behind him. He knocked. A long pause. Long enough that he understood she knew it was him, because only someone who knew exactly who was on the other side of a door needed that much time to decide whether to open it. She opened it. She was not in her uniform. This was such a simple thing, such an obvious thing. She was at home on a Sunday, but it landed with unexpected force. She was in loose trousers and an oversized cream sweater, her hair down around her shoulders, no careful blankness on her face because she hadn't had enough time to construct it. She looked like herself, the version of herself that existed when nobody was watching. He had not seen this version in 3 years. "You looked at my file," she said. "Yes." "That's a breach of employee privacy protocol." "I know." She looked at him for a moment. Then she stepped back from the door. The flat was small and precise and entirely her. Books organized by language. English on one shelf, French on another. A smaller shelf of Korean text that he looked at and felt something move through him that wasn't quite pain and wasn't quite relief. A small kitchen with herbs growing on the windowsill. Rosemary. Thyme. Something dark-leafed he didn't recognize. A desk covered in papers that she moved toward automatically, stacking them face down with a casualness that wasn't casual at all. "You're studying," he said. "I'm always studying." "What?" She hesitated, the hesitation of someone deciding how much of a true answer to give. "International trade law," she said finally. "Part-time, online." He was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. "How long?" 2 years. He sat down. She hadn't offered, but there was only one chair at the desk and a small sofa, and standing felt too much like a confrontation. He chose the sofa. She remained standing, which he understood. She needed the option of movement. "Zara," he said, "tell me what happened." "That's not a small question." "I know. I've been not asking it for 3 years. I think we've established that not asking isn't working." She looked at him. Outside, a church somewhere nearby was producing the distant sound of a choir. Something hymnal and old, drifting through the Sunday air like smoke. She sat down on the desk chair, pulled her knees up to her chest, a gesture so unguarded, so completely unlike the woman in the black uniform, that something in his throat tightened. "Where do you want me to start?" she asked. "Ghana," he said. "Start with Ghana. Start with the night I told you I loved you and the morning you were gone." Ghana. 3 years and 8 months ago. She had been working for a development consultancy then. Legitimate work, meaningful work, coordinating community engagement for infrastructure projects across West Africa. She had met him during a site visit. He had been there with a team assessing a potential investment. Roads, clean water systems, toward the kind of project that existed at the intersection of profit and genuine good. She had been the one briefing his team. She had been sharp and prepared and completely unimpressed by the money in the room, which he told her afterward was the first thing he noticed about her. They had talked for 6 hours that day. The meeting had been scheduled for 2. What followed was 3 months of something neither of them had vocabulary for. Not quite professional, not yet personal, conducted across countries and time zones, and the careful distance of two people who recognized something in each other and were frightened by the recognition. Emails that started formal and became something else entirely. Phone calls that lasted until one of them fell asleep. When a trip to Accra that he made for reasons he told himself were professional and that were not professional at all. And then one night on a shoreline outside Accra, the sky doing something extraordinary above them. He had said it. "I love you. I know the timing is wrong and the geography is wrong, and approximately everything about this is wrong. But I love you, and I think you should know." She had looked at him for a long time. The waves had come in and gone out. She had taken his hand. She had not set it back. But she had taken his hand, and in the specific language they had built between them in 3 months, that meant the same thing. He had gone back to his hotel. She had gone back to hers. In the morning, she was gone. My mother was sick, Zara said. Her voice was steady. She had rehearsed this, not in preparation for this specific conversation, but in the way you rehearse the hardest things by living with them until they become stories you can tell without bleeding. I got the call at 4 in the morning. Stroke. She was in Accra General. By the time I got to her, she was stable. But the doctors were saying, they were saying things that meant I needed to go home. Properly home. Not in a week. Immediately. Adrian was very still. I packed in 20 minutes, and she said, I left a message at the consultancy. She stopped. I didn't call you. No, he said quietly. You didn't. I told myself it was because I didn't have time. And that was true. But it wasn't the whole truth. She looked at her hands. The whole truth was that I was terrified, not of you, of what I felt. Because you had said it, and I knew it was true. For me too, I knew. And I had spent a very long time building a life that didn't depend on anyone else being in it. And love. She said the word carefully, the way you handle something that has cut you before. Love is the most radical form of dependence there is. And my mother was lying in a hospital, and I thought if I called you, if I heard your voice, I would fall apart. And I couldn't afford to fall apart. The choir outside drifted through another verse. Neither of them spoke for a moment. So I left, she said. And then the days passed and they became weeks, and it got harder and harder to explain the silence. So the silence just became what it was. A wall, he said. A wall, she agreed. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped, looking at the floor between them with the expression of a man carefully reconstructing something he had been looking at from the wrong angle for 3 years. Your mother, he said, is she? She's well. She recovered. She lives in Kumasi now. She grows tomatoes and argues with her neighbors, and she is aggressively, magnificently fine. Something moved across his face, relief and something warmer underneath it. Good, he said. That's good. She asks about you, Zara said. Then at his expression, I told her about you, before Ghana. She said you sounded like trouble. She wasn't wrong. No? A small silence. Not uncomfortable. The first comfortable silence they had shared in this version of their lives. The kind of silence that exists between people who have put down something heavy and are resting before deciding what to do next. Seoul, he said. How did you end up in Seoul? This part of the story she told differently, not because it was more painful, though it was, but because it was the part that still surprised her when she examined it. The part that looked from the outside like chaos, but had felt from the inside like something finding its shape. After Ghana, after her mother's recovery, she had found herself at a crossroads that felt less like a choice and more like a reckoning. The consultancy job was gone. She had missed too much time. The career she had been building felt suddenly theoretical, like a plan she had made for someone slightly different from who she had turned out to be. A friend had offered her a position in Seoul, administrative work for a Korean NGO, nothing glamorous, but a new city and a stipend, and the possibility of starting from somewhere entirely clean. She had gone. I didn't plan to learn Korean, she said. It started as necessity, and then it became, I don't know, a way of being someone no one had any preconceptions about. In Seoul, I was just a foreign woman learning the language. I wasn't anyone's daughter or ex-colleague or the woman who had disappeared on a man who loved her on a beach in Ghana. She said this last part plainly, without flinching. He took it the same way. I was just Zara, she said, learning something new. It was the first time in years I felt like I could breathe. And then you came to London. And then I came to London. To Coal Industries. She met his eyes. He held them. To Coal Industries. He looked at her for a long moment. Tell me you knew. I knew. Why? She uncurled from the chair, then stood up, moved to the window, looked out at the Sunday street below, where a woman was walking a dog the size of a small sofa, and a child was drawing something on the pavement in chalk. The ordinary, extraordinary texture of a world continuing to exist. Because I wasn't done, she said. I didn't know what that meant. I still don't know entirely what it means. But I knew that I had left something unfinished, and I couldn't keep moving forward while it was still unfinished. She heard him stand, heard his footsteps, unhurried, deliberate, cross the small room toward her. He stopped a few feet away. She could see his reflection in the window glass, superimposed over the street below. Wait, I looked for you for 8 months, he said again. I hired someone, a private investigator. He found your mother's address in Kumasi. He found your friend's NGO in Seoul. By the time he found you in London, she turned around. You knew I was here. I knew you were here. The room shifted. Then why? Because you hadn't called, he said simply. In 3 years, you had my number, and you hadn't called. And I decided, he paused, I decided that I wasn't going to be someone who showed up where he wasn't wanted. Even if it, another pause, longer. Even if it cost me, she looked at him. This man who had built 47 floors of steel and glass and could have used any of it to find her, to reach her, to demand an explanation, and had instead waited. Had been 3 floors below her orbit for 8 months, knowing she was there, giving her the space to come to him if and when she was ready. You were in the building, she said slowly. This whole time. Yes. And you never. No. Something cracked open in her chest. Not breaking. The opposite of breaking. The way a seed cracks open, which looks like destruction and is actually the beginning of everything. That, she said, her voice not entirely steady, was either the most respectful thing anyone has ever done for me, or, he asked, or the most absurd. Both, he said. Definitely both. She laughed. It came out small and surprised. The laugh of someone who had not expected to laugh in this conversation, who had not expected laughter to be available in this particular geography of feeling. But it was there, warm and real and sudden, like light through clouds. He smiled. And she had forgotten, genuinely forgotten, in 3 years and 8 months of careful forgetting, what it did to his face when he smiled, how it changed the whole architecture of him from something formidable into something human and specific and entirely dangerously his. Zara, he said. Don't, she said, still smiling, her eyes bright with something she was no longer trying to hide. Don't say it yet. Why? Because I want to be ready when you say it. She looked at him, fully, openly, with none of the careful management of the last 3 years. And I'm almost ready. I just need time, he said. A little. How much is a little? She considered. Less than 3 years. He laughed then, real, low, warm. The laugh of a man who has been carrying something very heavy and has just been told he can set it down soon. I can work with that, he said. She nodded, turned back to the window. He came to stand beside her. Not touching, but close. The right kind of close. The kind that says I'm here without saying I'm claiming. They stood together and watched the Sunday street below. The dog, the child's chalk drawing, the ordinary miracle of a world that had kept moving while they were learning how to stand still. Park, she said after a while, whatever he's planning, we'll handle it, Adrian said. Together, if you'll let me use that word. She considered this. Together, she said carefully, like someone trying on a coat they had convinced themselves wouldn't fit anymore. It fit. Together, she said again, more certain this time. Outside the child's chalk drawing was a sun, enormous, lopsided, gloriously yellow against the gray pavement. The kind of sun that only children draw, bigger than the sky, brighter than possible, entirely convinced of its own light. Zara looked at it and felt for the first time in 3 years and 8 months that the distance between where she was and where she was supposed to be was finally, mercifully, small enough to step across. The article went live on a Tuesday morning at 6 a.m. Zara saw it the way you see things that are designed to hurt you. All at once, without warning, on a screen that makes everything feel simultaneously enormous and unreal. She was on the bus to work, her coffee cooling in her hand, when her phone buzzed with a Google alert she had set up 3 days ago after the archive room conversation. And because she had known in the specific way that people who have been underestimated their whole lives know when something is coming for them. The headline read, "Coal Industries Deal Integrity Questioned, Unauthorized Staff Interference in Sensitive Korean Negotiation." The article was on a financial news site she didn't recognize, the kind that looked credible enough at first glance, with its clean layout and official-sounding name. But that existed, she understood immediately, for exactly this kind of purpose. The kind of site you build when you need somewhere to put a story that real journalists won't touch. It named her. Not by job title, worse, by full name, by nationality, by the detail that she was domestic service staff with no professional credentials in translation or finance. It described her intervention as a serious breach of protocol that raises questions about the legitimacy of the Korean agreement. It quoted an unnamed source close to the negotiation, Park clearly wearing the costume of anonymity, suggesting that the translation she provided had been potentially prejudicial to the Korean party's interests. It was elegant in its way. The lie was dressed in the clothes of concern. Not she interfered maliciously, but who authorized this? And can we trust what happened? The kind of question that doesn't need to be true to be damaging. The kind that makes people lean back from a deal table and say, perhaps we should wait. Zara read it twice. Then she put her phone in her pocket, looked out the bus window at London passing gray and indifferent. Ashen made a list in her head of exactly what she was going to do. She did not cry. She had known something like this was coming. Knowing doesn't make it hurt less, but it does mean you can stay on your feet when it arrives. Her phone rang. Adrian. She let it ring. She went to work. This was not avoidance. It was strategy. Disappearing now, calling in sick, rerouting her life around the article would look like guilt. And she was not guilty. She had done nothing wrong. She would behave like someone who had done nothing wrong because she was someone who had done nothing wrong. And she had learned a long time ago that the most radical thing a person in her position could do was refuse to act like an apology. She took the service entrance, the staff elevator. She restocked the hospitality card on the 32nd floor with the precision of someone performing a meditation. Her colleagues were quiet around her. Not unkind, quiet. The particular quiet of people who have seen the article or heard about it and don't know what to say. Mrs. Okafor passed her in the corridor and gripped her arm briefly. Just once. Just a second, without saying anything. It was enough. By 9:30, she had 3 missed calls from Adrian, one from a number she didn't recognize that turned out to be his legal team, and one from a journalist at the Financial Times who had somehow gotten her number and wanted a comment. She deleted the journalist's voicemail. She called the legal team back. Adrian found her at 10. She was in the archive room, not by accident this time. She had come here deliberately, Hana because it was small and quiet and had only one entrance, which meant she would know when someone arrived and would have the half second she needed to be ready. He came through the door and she saw it immediately, the controlled fury underneath the surface of him. Not at her. She knew the difference. This was the fury of someone who has watched something unjust happen to someone they... He stopped, looked at her. "You've seen it," he said. 6 a.m. "Why didn't you answer?" "Because I needed to think before I talked to you," she said. "And you needed to think before you talked to me. Because you were going to come in here wanting to fix it, and I needed to be the one to tell you how." He looked at her for a moment. Then something in his posture shifted. The slight lowering of the shoulders that meant he was listening in the real way. The way that doesn't multitask. "Tell me how," he said. She had spent 4 hours on the bus in the hospitality cart building this. "The article is targeting the deal's legitimacy," she said. "Not me personally, me as a mechanism. If they can make Mr. Yoon's team question the translation, the deal stalls. That's what Park actually wants. Not my reputation. The deal." "I know. So defending me personally doesn't fix it. It just makes noise." She looked at him steadily. What fixes it is Mr. Yoon. A pause. Go on. You have his direct contact. You've been building this relationship for 18 months. Call him. Not through lawyers, not through PR. You directly. Explain what happened. Show him the boardroom recordings. Let him make his own assessment. She paused. Huan, and this is the part your lawyers are going to hate, let me write a statement. Zara, my name is on that article. My response should come from my name. She held his gaze. I'm not hiding behind Coal Industries' communications team. I didn't hide in that boardroom, and I won't hide now. He looked at her for a long moment. The archive room hummed. Outside, the building went about its enormous, indifferent business. What will the statement say? He asked. The truth, she said. All of it. My qualifications, my time and soul, my fluency, why I intervened, what I heard and what I said. A beat. And I'll submit my academic records and language certifications to anybody that wants to verify them. You have certifications? Level 5 Korean language proficiency. A certified court interpreter qualification. I completed it last year. She said this without flourish, without performance. Simply the way you state facts that have always been true whether anyone knew them or not. Adrian stared at her. You're a certified court interpreter, he said, among other things. While working as a maid, she said. Yes, people contain multitudes, Adrian. You of all people should know that. Something moved across his face. Not surprise anymore. Something past surprise. Something that looked very much like the specific awe of a person encountering, fully and finally, the complete dimensions of someone they thought they already knew. Okay, he said quietly. Okay? Okay. We do it your way. He called Mr. Yoon at 11. Zara was not in the room for this. She had her own work to do. And also she understood that this was a conversation about trust between two men who had been building something, and that her presence would change the geometry of it in ways that wouldn't help. She sat in the 32nd floor kitchen and wrote her statement in longhand first. The way her father had taught her, if it's important enough to say publicly, it's important enough to write by hand first, then typed it up with the careful precision of someone who knows that every word is weight-bearing. She sent it to Adrian at 12:30. He read it standing in his office. She knew this because he called her 30 seconds after she sent it, and she could hear in the quality of the silence before he spoke that he had read it standing up. The kind of reading that doesn't let you sit down. It's perfect, he said. It's true, she said. Well, same thing, hopefully. Zara, a pause. Yoon read the recordings. She closed her eyes. And? He said, and I'm translating this from the message his assistant sent, so forgive any nuance I miss. He said that the deal is not in question, that his team's legal review of the translation confirms yours was accurate, and that, another pause, this one different in texture, warmer, almost careful, like he was handling something he didn't want to drop. He said he would like to formally request that you be present at the signing. The kitchen was very quiet. As what? She asked. He didn't specify. I think... She could hear the smile in his voice. I think he just wants you there. The statement went live at 2 p.m. By 4, today it had been picked up by 3 legitimate financial outlets who had done what the original article hadn't, called her certifying bodies, verified her qualifications, spoken to her former NGO in Seoul. By 5, the original article had been quietly, unceremoniously taken down. By 6, Park's lawyer had sent a terse email to Adrian's legal team, indicating that his client would not be pursuing further action. Men like Park, Zara had learned, were structurally dependent on the people they targeted behaving like targets. The moment you didn't, there was nothing left for them to aim at. She was in the staff locker room, changing out of her uniform for the last time, when Mrs. Okafor appeared in the doorway. Your transfer, Mrs. Okafor said, with the air of a woman announcing something she has found considerable satisfaction in, as has been formally declined. Zara looked up. You've been regraded, Mrs. Okafor continued. As of this morning, Executive Floor Coordinator, Language Services and Client Relations. She held out a form. It comes with a rather significant pay adjustment. Zara took the form, read it, looked up. Did he? The regrading was submitted by HR following a review of your credentials, Mrs. Okafor said, her expression entirely innocent of everything it was not innocent of, which apparently have been on file for some time and were simply overlooked. A pause. The review was requested by Mr. Cole. Personally, Zara looked at the form for a long moment. Thank you, Mrs. Okafor, she said. Don't thank me, Mrs. Okafor said. Thank whatever made you open your mouth in that boardroom. She left. Zara stood alone in the locker room, beholding the form in the particular silence that exists after a long and difficult thing has finally resolved itself. Not loudly. Resolutions rarely come loudly. They come the way this one did. A form, a title change. The quiet administrative acknowledgement that the world had rearranged itself slightly to reflect something true. She folded the form, put it in her bag, looked at herself in the small mirror above the lockers. The woman who looked back was not the ghost of the last 3 years. She was not the girl on the Ghanaian shoreline either. She was something past both of those. A woman who had carried her own story through cities and languages and silences and had arrived finally at a place where the story could be told out loud. She picked up her bag and went upstairs. He was on the roof. Well, Coal Industries had a roof terrace that nobody used because it required a key card that only existed in 3 copies, and Adrian had never seen the point of advertising it. She had known about it for 2 years, had cleaned it once in the early days, and pocketed the knowledge the way she pocketed most things, quietly, for later. She used her new key card, which she noticed had roof access, and pushed through the door into the early evening air. London spread out below them in every direction. Not gray now, gold and amber and the particular deep blue of a city sky at dusk. The light doing what it does in the last hour before dark, making everything look more significant than it did in daylight, more worth keeping. Adrian was standing at the railing, his jacket off, his sleeves rolled up, looking out at the city with an expression she recognized, the one he wore when he was allowing himself to feel something instead of managing it. He heard the door, turned. She held up her key card. Executive Floor Coordinator, Language Services and Client Relations. He smiled. It was the right title. It's a significant pay adjustment. Also right. She walked across the roof to stand beside him. The city below was doing its extraordinary ordinary thing. Millions of people, millions of lives, the vast and beautiful machinery of human existence, grinding and glittering in every direction. You didn't ask me, she said, about the title? About any of it? No, he said. I didn't. A pause. Was that wrong? She considered. The wind moved her hair. Below them, a red bus crossed a bridge. Ask me now, she said. He turned to face her. The last of the evening light was doing something to the air between them. Warm, specific, the quality of light that exists in certain moments and nowhere else. Zara Mensah, he said, will you stay? Not will you take the job. Not will you let me fix what happened. Will you stay? The full weight of what the question contained, the city, the building, the 3 years, the shoreline in Ghana, the 2 years in Seoul, the Sunday morning in Peckham, all of it settled into those 3 words with the precision of something that had been waiting a long time to be said correctly. She looked at him, this man, this specific, complicated, patient, impossible man who had known she was in his building for 8 months and had waited, who had let her set the pace of every step they had taken toward each other, because he understood, instinctively, that some people need to choose with their whole self or not at all. I'm already here, she said. He reached out, slowly giving her every opportunity to step back, and took her hand. His fingers closed around hers the way they had on a shoreline in Ghana, in a different version of this story, before they both knew how much it would cost them to learn what they were learning. It felt the same. It felt completely different. It felt like both of those things were true simultaneously, which is the specific quality of real love. It carries everything that came before it, without being defined by any of it. I owe you an apology, he said. You don't? I do. I should have come to find you in Seoul. I told myself I was respecting your choice, but some of it was fear, and I'd rather tell you that than pretend I was only ever noble. She looked at him for a long moment. I should have called you from the hospital, she said. I told myself I was protecting myself, but some of it was that I didn't believe I was worth coming back for. And I'd rather tell you that than pretend I was only ever afraid. They stood with these truths between them, not as accusations, not as wounds, but as the necessary archaeology of two people deciding to build something on honest ground instead of comfortable fiction. We were both idiots, he said. Spectacular idiots, she agreed, in multiple countries. On at least 2 continents, she laughed. He laughed. The laughter rose and went out over London and dissolved into the enormous evening air. And below them the city moved and glittered and continued in its magnificent indifference. And above them, the first stars were beginning their patient arrival in the darkening sky. He lifted her hand, pressed his mouth against her knuckles, briefly, gently, the kind of kiss that isn't a beginning or an ending, but a landmark. Here, this, now. What happens tomorrow? She asked. You come to work, he said, in your actual capacity, and we figure out the rest as we go. That's not a plan. No, he said. It's better than a plan. It's a choice. She looked out at the city. The gold was deepening to amber, the amber to rose, the sky doing its slow and stunning work of becoming night. Somewhere out there, her mother was growing tomatoes in Kumasi. Somewhere out there, mister. Iyun was reading a signed deal and feeling the particular satisfaction of a man who trusted his instincts. Somewhere out there, the world was full of people who had loved something and lost it and were deciding in small and private moments like this one whether to try again. Zara Mensah had spent 3 years and 8 months being invisible. She had spent 2 years in a city where nobody knew her story, learning a language that had saved a man's legacy and, in saving it, had finally, irrevocably saved her own. She was 31 years old. She had a first-class degree, a level 5 language proficiency, a court interpreter certification, and a new job title. She spoke 4 languages. She had loved someone across 3 years of silence and 2 continents of distance and had discovered, standing on a London rooftop in the last light of a Tuesday evening, that the love had not diminished. It had, like all things that survive difficulty, simply become more itself. Okay, she said. Okay? She turned to look at him, fully, openly, the woman she was, in all her dimensions, seen and seeing. A choice, she said. Yes, let's make one. He smiled at the real one, the one that changed everything. And the city below them blazed gold, and the stars above came out one by one, and the distance between where they had been and where they were standing now was exactly the length of a journey that had been, in the end, entirely worth taking. If you've ever let fear make you smaller than you are, and then found someone who saw your full size anyway and waited, then you know that healing isn't a moment. It's a choice you make when you're finally ready. And sometimes the most extraordinary thing about love isn't that it finds you. It's that it stays, even when you make it wait in the dark. Thank you for staying with this story from the beginning. If Zara's courage moved you, if Adrian's patience felt like something you needed to see, share this with someone who needs to be reminded that it's not too late. And if you're new here, every story we tell is built for people who feel things deeply. You're in the right place. Welcome home.